Did you know that 2 out of every 3 guys is going to experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35? What? Had no idea, Keeps. Oh wait. I wish Keeps had been around when I was younger, because advancements in science meant that there are now treatments that can combat the symptoms of hair loss and help you keep the hair that you have. It's too late for me. My hair is gone and it's never, ever coming back. But you don't have to be like me. You can stop your hair loss early thanks to Keeps. Keeps offers generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved drugs for treating hair loss. So you might have tried them before. Sure, you might have, but never for a price this low. That's right, if you were thinking, some sort of medicine, Simon? Sounds expensive. Well, don't worry. Keeps starts at just $10 a month. Yes. So, how does it work? Well, for one thing, no need to visit a doctor's office. Just schedule a quick online consult. Bit later, package arrives at your door. Discreet package, by the way, using the privacy of your own home. Wonderful. So if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, it's not going to fix itself. Trust me. Do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/side projects or click the link below and you'll get what? 50% off your first order. Yes! And now today's video. Given the depth and breadth of the human experience, it stands to reason that over the course of history, things will unintentionally overlap, synchronize, or resonate down the years. In what is definitely not a coincidence, this is the second helping of things tied to famous historical people or events that might be considered coincidental, spooky, or just a little bit weird. Everyone has heard of William Shakespeare, the English playwright who died in the 17th century, who penned such enduring plays as Romeo and Juliet, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Macbeth. The influence of his work lives on today through such phrases as the green-eyed monster, wild goose chase, and at one fell swoop, which all originated in his plays. Did you know, though, that Shakespeare might have been planning on creating an even longer legacy for himself by inserting his name into the Bible? The KJV, or King James Version, is the 17th century's English translation of the Bible. Thanks to the printing press, it became widely available and wildly popular. A panel of biblical scholars and translators had been tasked with creating a new English version of the text, variously from Hebrew and Aramaic versions of the Old Testament. Variously from Hebrew and Aramaic versions of the Old Testament, Greek versions of the New Testament, and Greek and Latin texts of the books of the Apocrypha. The project started in 1604, and the King James Bible was first published in 1611. And now for the coincidence part. In 1610, as the King James Bible was nearing completion, would it be so outlandish an idea that one of the foremost literary superstars in the land would be asked to run a quick eye over some passages and maybe just jazz them up a little? Well, in the year 1610, Shakespeare would have been 46. If you take a look at Psalm 46 in the King James Bible and count the words, the 46th one from the beginning is the word shake. If you count from the end of the psalm and ignore the word Salah, which is generally agreed to be more of a punctuation note than a word, the 46th word is spear. Moreover, in the 17th century equivalent of scrawling Shakespeare was here, somewhere in the name William Shakespeare can be rearranged the anagram, here I was like a psalm. While many holes can be poked in the theory, and there has been no evidence that Shakespeare had any hand in writing or editing the King James Version of the Bible, it's still a fun coincidence linking 2 of the most influential elements of the English language and culture. Also, whoever worked this out has way too much time on their hands. The president's assassin's brother. You may be familiar with the name John Wilkes Booth. In 1865, the 26-year-old actor, who was vehemently opposed to many of President Abraham Lincoln's views and policies, shot the president in the back of the head during a performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theatre in Washington, D.C. Booth had easy access to all areas of the theatre, as he was a well-known actor and had even performed there with President Lincoln in the audience on a previous occasion in 1863. He wasn't the only actor in his family, however, with his father and siblings also well-known for treading the boards. In 1864, John, along with his older brothers Edwin and Junius Booth, stars in a one-off performance of Julius Caesar. But while John Wilkes Booth went down in infamy for assassinating Abraham Lincoln, his brother Edwin played an almost opposite role in history. Edwin Booth was born in 1833 and had a successful career as a Shakespearean actor. In the mid-1860s, Edwin Booth was at a train station in New Jersey. The platform was very crowded, and as a train started to move drove off, he saw a man twist and fall down in the space between the train and the platform edge. Grabbing the man by the collar of his coat, Booth managed to haul him up to safety. The man actually recognized Booth as the famous actor and thanked him profusely. It wasn't until a few months later, when Booth received a letter from a friend who was working with the man, that he found out who he had rescued. After having to live with the consequence of his brother's actions of killing Abraham Lincoln, it must have been some small consolidation when Edwin Booth was told that the man whose life had saved that day was actually Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert. Out of Lincoln's 4 sons, Robert was the only one to live past the age of 18, and he died a wealthy man at the age of 82. Starting and ending the First World War. It's commonly agreed that the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife by a Serbian terrorist group was the tipping point that started the First World War. While other factors were absolutely in play, the assassination led Austria-Hungary to declare war on Serbia on the 28th of July 1914, shortly followed by Germany declaring war on Russia and then France in August. But would this have happened if the heir to the throne of Austria and Hungary had escaped the assassination attempt in the first place? We can't say for sure, of course, but he nearly did avoid the ambush. Franz Ferdinand was in Sarajevo when the events unfolded in June of 1914, overseeing a military training exercise. Bosnia and Herzegovina had recently been annexed by Austria-Hungary, but Serbia was also interested in acquiring it as part of their budding empire. Franz Ferdinand, being there at that time, was supposed to send a warning message to Serbia to lay off the aggressive behavior. He chose a bad date, however. The 28th of June is celebrated in Serbia as St. Vitus Day, a culturally important day in remembrance of the Battle of Kosovo, which took place in 1389. Having just won back Kosovo after the Second Balkan War, the 28th of June in 1914 was of extra importance to Serbia, so many nationalists were angered by Franz Ferdinand's visit on that particular day. A group of Bosnian Serbs linked to the Serbian terrorist group the Black Hand set themselves up to ambush the Archduke's car. The route his car was going to take was widely available, and security was minimal as they were driven through Sarajevo. As the Archduke's motorcade headed to the city centre, a bomb was thrown at his car. The driver managed to miss it, but it hit the car behind, causing several injuries. Apparently not too concerned about the threat to his life, the Archduke carried on with his visit to meet the mayor. After this, he wanted to go to the hospital to check on people injured by the bomb, but in a stroke of fate that could have easily been avoided, nobody briefed the drivers of the motorcade that the route had been changed. The drivers of the first 2 cars were Czech, and everybody else was speaking German, and the message just never got through. Even after the first failed assassination attempt and the change of plans to go to the hospital, the cars managed to make it back to the originally planned route. When someone else in the Archduke's car noticed that they were going the wrong way, the driver slowed down right in front of Gavrilo Princip, one of the members of the terrorist group, who promptly fired 2 shots into the car, killing Franz Ferdinand and his wife and jump-starting the hostilities of World War I. As well as the coincidence of being in the exact wrong spot at the wrong time to start the Great War, Franz Ferdinand also had a link to the end of it. The car that he and his wife were in had the number plate AIII 118, which, if spaced equally, can be read as 11/11/18. The 11th of November 1918 was the date the armistice was signed, ending the fighting of the First World War. A coincidence rather than a prophetic message, perhaps, but it's still quite an interesting fact. Read the warnings. 14th century warlord Tamerlane, or Timur, was responsible for an estimated 17 million deaths as he built an empire across Asia. He was buried in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, and for some reason Joseph Stalin thought it would be a good idea to send a team out there to open his tomb. They travelled to the gravesite in June 1941, much to the concern of basically everyone in Samarkand. On Timur's tombstone was an engraving that translated as, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." As we all know, warnings like these always fall on deaf ears, so the archaeologists kept on going. On the 20th of June 1941, they opened Timur's coffin. Legend has it that inscribed on the inside was the final warning: "Whoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." Again, the warning was not heeded, and the embalmed remains of the deceased leader were flown to the Soviet Union. 2 days after his tomb was broken into, Timur's curse came true as Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa and started his invasion of the Soviet Union. The death toll for the Second World War far exceeds the estimated 17 million that perished under the military operations led by Timur, so In that way, Hitler definitely was a more terrible invader. And what did Stalin do with Timur's body once he had it? Perhaps spooked by the apparent curse it unleashed and desperate to try anything that might turn the tide, Stalin ordered Timur's body to be reburied in his tomb at Samarkand with full Islamic burial rites at the end of 1942. It seems to have done the trick, as shortly after the body was laid back to rest, the German army surrendered, losing the Battle of Stalingrad, which was a pivotal moment in World War II. So, maybe, let those sleeping warlords lie. Another huge turning point for World War II was the invasion of German-occupied Europe by the Allies, codenamed Operation Overlord. The plan consisted of British, American, Canadian troops landing on beaches in Normandy. These beaches were codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Large concrete caissons were also towed over to form harbors to aid the invasion. These were known as the Mulberry Harbors. This first phase of the plan was codenamed Operation Neptune. During wartime, it was obviously of paramount importance to keep information under wraps to give your plans the best possible chance of success. So, it must have been a bit surprising and then very concerning to the military when not just one or two, but every single major code word from the Normandy landings started popping up in British newspapers' crossword puzzles just weeks before the planned invasion. The answers of Utah and Omaha in the Telegraph crossword puzzle first got the attention of Britain's military intelligence agency, MI5, in May of 1944, and it turned out that in the days prior, Gold, Sword, and Juno had also made appearances as answers. Was this a mole leaking information to the enemy? Even more suspiciously, the answers Mulberry and Overlord appeared in fairly quick succession, followed mere days before D-Day by the word Neptune. One man was responsible for all the crosswords, so MI5 went and paid him a bit of a visit. Leonard Dorr was a teacher and crossword compiler and claimed complete innocence over his role in potentially giving away major information to enemy forces. His reaction as to why he had used the words in his puzzles was, why not? Interestingly, Dorr had been investigated 2 years earlier when another crossword he had created contained the answer Dieppe, which seems innocent enough, but it was published 2 days before the Allies tried to capture the French port of Dieppe. There may be an explanation for this, though. During the war, there were plenty of soldiers living with or near families from his school, and Dorr often sought inspiration for crossword clues from his older students. They might have picked up on some frequently used code words and suggested them to him for inclusion. After thorough investigations, no charges were ever brought against Dorr, so it seems that including all the code words for one of the most important military operations in history just before it happened was nothing more than an unwitting coincidence. So I really hope you found today's video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching.